Welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast with Jackson and Kyle. I am Jackson, and I'm joined here, as always, by a man who would never spend 4 straight days in the dark. Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I think I got a stress fracture in my foot, but that's whatever, you know.
Oh, no. What happened?
Well, I was playing pickup basketball. I was playing this kid one-on-one, and I went up for a rebound, and I came down on it, and I was like, oh, that feels a little weird. And then 2 weeks later, and I'm just like waddling around because I could barely stand on it. I don't know what happened, but I don't know. Just very weird, very bizarre. The problem is that I got so out of shape and then decided I'm going to try and get back in shape that like I went too hard too fast because
Yeah, that's always tough. Is that you had the most? It's like your motivation was built up for the entire time you were out of shape till in like that first couple days back.
yeah. And I think like the other thing is too, like I only know how to work out and like compete like when I play sports
Okay.
as a person who's in good shape.
Right.
Like, I don't
Right.
know
Yeah.
how
Exactly.
I don't know how to manage myself in a basketball game being fat. And the
Right.
problem is I'm trying to play like I'm still 180 pounds and I'm not. And this is way too much information, but this is this is my life right now.
Yes. We have in the chat. Hot take: Kyle beats LeVar 1-on-1. What do you think, Kyle?
He did play college ball, so probably not.
Yeah, that might be tough. So you
He's
might
not
think,
beating Michael Jordan one-on-one, but he's probably beating me.
okay, well, he has that going for him. Kyle, 32 teams are in the NFL. What we're going to be doing today is draft style power ranking all 32 teams. This is not in terms of who we think will do the best next year. This is in terms of who we think has the best chance of winning the Super Bowl next year. There is a distinction because, basically the way to view it is if God came down and told me, hey, the Cincinnati Bengals are going to go to the Super Bowl but lose in the Super Bowl, then instead of ranking them at number 2, I'd rank them at number 32. That's how this would work. So, sound good, Kyle?
Yeah, it'd be pretty interesting if God just came down to tell you about Bengals futures.
Yeah, that'd be a weird. It wouldn't even be that helpful. Like, why tell me who loses the Super Bowl? I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, exactly. What a useless person. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now that I'm, dissed God and, told people about my workout struggles, let's get into it. I'm ready to go.
Yes, let's get into it. Kyle, I don't know. Since you're nursing an injury, I'll let you go first. Why don't you pick the team most likely to win the 2023 Super Bowl, which would take place in 2024? They need to figure out a better way to do that. But who do you have?
Yeah. All right. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here. This one feels like a layup, and I'll take the layup if you're giving me the first pick. I'm taking
Patriots.
the defending. Yeah, exactly. I'm taking the defending champions. I'll go ahead and take the Kansas City Chiefs number 1. They're not like in a perfect spot. I mean, they're in a pretty good spot because they have Patrick Mahomes. And I think they have some cap flexibility. The real questions for them, like Carlos Dunlap was pretty impactful for them last year. Juju Smith-Schuster, I thought, was largely a pretty good pickup for them last season. Those guys have to be addressed. And then the other thing that's basically their big position of need is both their starting tackles are free agents, which, is a little bit of a concern, but you have Patrick Mahomes, so I'm not overly worried. I think as long as Mahomes is healthy, this team's going to be in the conversation for a Super Bowl, and they have the draft capital, some draft capital to be able to make this work, possibly replace those tackles and go from there.
Yeah, they're in an interesting spot. I agree. This is number 1 on my board as well. Also, I want to explain the -3 next to their name. I put how much cap space each team has next to their name here. So Chiefs have -3 million in cap space, which is actually not the worst spot to be in. It seems terrible, but in the NFL, you can work around it. Biggest notable free agents, Juan Thornhill, Juju Smith-Schuster. Those are guys that I don't think they like, but I don't think they need desperately. You're right, though. The tackles is the question, and especially, Orlando Brown Jr. is kind of the biggest question of, feels like someone's going to overpay him, right? It feels like that's going to happen. Do you want to be the one to overpay him? Because what's behind door number 2 might be worse.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Orlando Brown is the, a top 5 left tackle in the league, but at the same time, he's not bad.
Right.
We did, kind of pick him apart a little bit in the playoffs with some of his struggles, but at the same time, there are certainly worse options than Orlando Brown Jr. out there, and that's the big question. But they have flexibility, they really do, because I mean, just looking at it right now, they could cut Frank Clark. I was just looking at their sheet real quick. They could cut Frank Clark and save $21 million, and at that point, they're basically fine. But yeah, I mean, I think that they should, the big thing with this team this season is like they're not going to waste a first round pick on a running back like they did the last time they won a Super Bowl. So,
Hmm.
that's probably going to be a pretty good starter at that 32nd spot, you'd think. Plus, there's, even if they decided to cut a guy like Frank Clark, they can get, George Karlaftis, I think is going to be better next season. And I think they got some young, talented players. So they got a couple guys to address, but overall, I think they're just going to be really good again.
Yeah, and obviously the Mahomes stuff goes without saying. Also, we talk about they had it's really you could argue they had 9 contributors in the draft last year if you count special teams. They had a ton of players come in, and those guys are all going to be cheap for the next 3 years. So
Mhm.
you're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah. Yeah, this team's young and talented, and I think they're gonna be good for this foreseeable future. This is definitely not the last we heard of KC.
Right, definitely not. Let's move on. Number 2, this is where the list gets interesting, right? Because everyone has the
Yeah.
Chiefs as the front runners. Number 2, several teams I think you could go with. I'm going to go Cincinnati here. Cincinnati has
Mhm.
35 million in cap space. They were, I don't know, you could argue they were the closest to beating the Chiefs this season. They, nearly had it. If it wasn't for a dumb penalty by Joseph Osai at the end of the conference championship, there's a real chance that they are Super Bowl champions. Now, again, got some players to sign. Their safeties have been great, and they're both free agents. Jesse Bates and Von Bell, both free agents. Some other guys like Jermaine Pratt, Hayden Hurst. It's really the safeties that are the key thing, but they have the money to do it. I think that they're going to. I see no reason why they'd take a step back unless they trade T. Higgins, which it seems like they don't actually want to do. That was just kind of speculation. So looks pretty good for Cincinnati.
Yeah, I think it looks very good. This was number 2 on my list too, and yeah, I mean the one question is these safeties, and I mean you can tag a guy like Von Bell basically, and then work out something with Bates. Because the one question for Cincinnati going forward is that extension for Joe Burrow's coming, that
Hmm.
extension for Jamar Chase is coming. How much future money do you want to commit this season, even though you have the space to really go for it? And I think that's going to be the question for the Bengals, but I think there's some flexibility there, so I'm not overly worried. It's just something they're going to have to address either this offseason or down the line, how they're going to free up that space for those 2 guys. So, yeah, they're going to be really good. And, even if they lose one of those safeties, Awuzie is a guy who at corner didn't play most of the season last year. He's
Hmm.
going to come back healthy. I thought Cam Taylor Britt had some real moments to end the season last year, especially
Yeah.
that Bills playoff game. So they're going to have guys in that secondary still going into next season.
Yeah, and and that's the other thing too is do they find an Eli Apple replacement? This team could even improve significantly.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're in a really good spot. They're another team that, they're going to be good for the foreseeable future. All they got to, the biggest question is when do they want to pay Burrow and Chase?
Could you argue they should be number 1?
Um, I think you could argue it. I'm not really listening to it, but I think you could argue it.
Not even listening to it. Well, I'll play devil's advocate. I had him too, but like I said, the Chiefs are losing their tackles, and they don't have a ton of cap space to make up for it. The Bengals, they never have tackles, so they're fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they paid everybody last offseason for that offensive line, right? So a lot
Hmm.
of those guys are going to be back. Yeah, I don't know. I think, if the one thing the Chiefs have to address is, I mean, it's not the only thing they have to address for the Chiefs because they do have like Juan Thornhill's a guy I bet they'd like to have back. But
Sure.
like for the most part, like if that's your biggest thing is you just need to get tackles, like it's not just tackles, but at the same time, that's something I think they can figure out and make work. And they have maybe the best interior offensive line in football. So it's not
Hmm.
like it's the worst thing in the world for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Number 3, Kyle, where are you going?
All right, number 3, I am gonna pull up the. I was looking at the Super Bowl odds, future Super Bowl odds, to help me out here. Some of these are
Okay.
crazy. Some of these are
Yeah.
absolutely insane. But we'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
Um, I, I'm not gonna get fancy here again. I'm just gonna go San Francisco at 3. They do have free agents. They have like 5 big free agents. I think Emmanuel Mosley, Ebukam, um, Mike McGlinchey, Al Shair. Those are all pretty good players. But I just trust the system. I trust the system more than anything. And the system continually shows that it can work and be dominant. And I think this is going to be a really good team again, as long as one of these quarterbacks are healthy for the season.
Well, and That's the question, I think. So I had them at 4. So I'm very much still high on the 49ers, but I had one team ahead of them, and it's because of how much I value the quarterback position. Yes, I did to say, a lot of people kind of said, you plug any quarterback in there, Kyle Shanahan can win with them. So far in San Francisco, he's won with 2 quarterbacks, right? He's won with Garoppolo and he's won with Purdy. Trey Lance, he had 2 games with. It's mostly been those 2 guys. Now, I'm not saying that, I mean, listen, his system obviously makes things easier on quarterbacks, but if they let Garoppolo walk, which a lot of people think they will, and it's Brock Purdy who comes in, and maybe he isn't what he was last year. If Trey Lance isn't what we think he can be, there's that question mark in terms of winning a Super Bowl. Because again, that's what we're evaluating here. That's my concern and why I ended up having him a spot lower than you did.
Yeah, and I get it, but at the same time, I don't know. I just think if they're going to put both of those young guys out there, I still believe in Trey Lance's talent.
Sure.
It's still not, there's not a lot of sample to go off of, so I'm not judging his game performance yet because it's only been a few games. So I still believe in Trey Lance's talent, and I just think, if you're going to have him and Purdy compete for the job, if Purdy's healthy by the start of the season, I think one of those guys are going to be all right. I think one of those guys are going to be pretty good. And not to mention, we still think this is one of the better situations for any young quarterback to go into because they're still going to have, they're going to have to address McGlinchey. But at the same time, I still think even if they lose McGlinchey, this is going to be a good offensive line. They still got Christian McCaffrey back for next season. They got Deebo Samuel for next season. And potentially they have Brandon Ayuk still for next season. So this is still going to be a really good team in my mind.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Again, they're number 4 on my list. They're going to be very good. The question is just, I guess, let's maybe transition because if we're talking about my number 3 team, we can kind of talk about them together a little bit. I have the Buffalo Bills. They go here at 4. I had them at number 3. And my logic behind it is, I know that they're always the preseason favorites, and they never seemingly live up to the hype. But I don't know. Maybe this one year where they're not that, you can feel a little better about them. Now, they got some cap issues to worry about, and Jordan Poyer and Tremaine Edmonds are free agents. They're very good players. So there is some reason to believe the Bills could take a step back. At the same time, Kyle, I don't know. I know it didn't end well, but I was really impressed with Josh Allen last year. I actually think Josh Allen had his best season in the NFL last year. It had a collapse in that Cincinnati game, and I don't even think it was entirely his issue. If you tell me there's 2 teams with good talent around them, and one of them has the superstar quarterback, one of them has a complete question mark at quarterback, I'm going to go with the superstar quarterback.
I think that's fair. And they were 4th on my list, so it's not like I'm putting them too low. I think there's just a couple more questions for me with Buffalo, which, like you said, fair. The quarterback is the biggest question, and the San Francisco has the question at quarterback. But I don't know, they loaded up this defense, I thought, last season, and it didn't perform as spectacularly as we hoped. And I think Tremaine Edmonds and Jordan Poyer are both kind of important for this team.
Sure.
And I don't know if they're going to get either of those guys back based on their cap situation. Now they could, push money down the road, load up again. But, at the point that they're at, 16 over the cap, it becomes a little bit of a question. They don't have a ton of draft capital either. They're 24th in the league in draft capital this season. So I do think there's a couple questions on depth, especially as they loaded up that defense. And how does it get back to that point? But it's, again, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, good offensive line. There's a lot to be excited about for this Bills team, so I'm not overly worried. I still think they're the favorites in the East. They're going to be one of the best teams in the AFC. Those are just my questions when I look at the Super Bowl contenders for next year.
Yeah, fair enough. I think they're in the same tier of me for the 49ers. There's some ways they can get around the cap, such as like Naheem Hines has, cutting him would save $5 million. Have to imagine that's on the table when you're in this cap crunch. And again, you can always push the can down the road a little bit. The average team spends about $10 million over the cap. So, they're okay, but you're right. Losing a couple figures, and plus, I think the other thing too is San Francisco plays in the NFC. That's just an advantage over Buffalo.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that a lot in this one because the NFC, once again, looks pretty weak, I think, for this next season. So it looks pretty forgettable in my mind.
Maybe even weaker this year than it was last year.
Yeah, it feels like it might be. I think I touched everything on Buffalo. You want to move on?
Yeah, let's move on. Do you have an NFC team here at 5?
I do. And it's mainly, I have a couple. I think if I were to rank these teams on talent going forward, I think I would have a couple teams higher. But I think once again, if it comes down to can this team beat San Francisco in a playoff game and get to the Super Bowl? That's a lot easier of a path than having to go through a Kansas City, Buffalo situation or Cincinnati situation. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I guess I'll just take the Cowboys at this spot.
Wow.
This team, I don't think they're going to win the Super Bowl, but at the same time, like, this team's not talentless. This is a talented football team still, and I think they're going to be okay. So I just think it comes down to, can they reload? Can they address the receiver position? Can they do some of that stuff and get to the point? I think they're going to be the favorites in the NFC East.
These are scorching hot takes coming from right here, Kyle. I had the Cowboys again. I'm always too low on the Cowboys. You're always too high on the Cowboys. I had them at 19 on my list.
19 seems very high. So explain your Cowboys reasoning.
I mean, this is not the team that wins the Super Bowl. The team that pays big money to the okay quarterback and doesn't have receivers. I mean, when has this worked?
Well, they have a whole offseason to address the receiver spot, right?
With what money, though? I mean, you're losing Dalton Schultz. You're losing Tony Pollard. Leighton Vander Esch had this really good season. That it's concerning for me that you're losing two of your great skill players for a team that was really low on skill players.
Yeah, but this is another one where I think that they can make some of this work. I think they can get some of these guys back. I think Pollard is coming back, and a lot of that is going to be with. They're going to have to get creative with the cap. They're going to have to restructure some of these deals, probably restructure Dak, honestly, and they're going to have to make some of these deals work. But I think some of these guys are coming back. They don't have a ton of draft capital, so I think they really need these guys to be on the team. So I just think that they're going to be able to figure this out, and I don't think the roster is going to look that much different than last season.
And last season, they did not really contend for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, but I just,
my issue is
I think
my issue is because again, people saying like 19 is pretty low, but it would be around 10 for me. Yeah. Also Cowboys at 5 as well. I love it, Kyle. A lot of people are splitting the difference between where we have them. My issue, again, the whole thing is it's likely to win a Super Bowl, not where I'm expecting them to end up in the standings. I expect them to get closer to 5th in the standings next year than 19th. But my thing is, I just don't see how this team is the best team in football unless they just find some steal, have like an all-time great draft or something.
Either an all-time great draft or an all-time great playoff run, right? Which, I mean,
sure.
I don't know. I think they're a little closer than you think in some of these playoff games. I don't know. Like, it wouldn't be, especially when I just look at the NFC teams. Like, do you feel better about the Cowboys in the next season or the Eagles?
The Eagles. I think kind of obvious given where I have the Cowboys.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the Eagles got a lot of things they have to address in the next season, including introducing 2 new coordinators to the spot.
Well, let's talk about both of them then. Let's use that as a transition to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles, who I have as my number 5 team. I already had the page on my notes up when you were talking about your NFC East, your NFC team you were going to pick. To me, the Eagles, I definitely have higher than the Cowboys in terms of likelihood. And again, I get it. The Eagles have a ton of players they have to worry about, of guys that could be walking, of, just reading off the list here, Javon Hargrave, James Bradbury, CJ Gardner-Johnson, TJ Edwards, Isaac Seumalo, Miles Sanders, Kaiser White, Marcus Epps. That's just the people that are on PFF's top 100 free agents board. There's more guys there. They have a ton. But they still have Devonta Smith. They still have A.J. Brown. They still have Jalen Hurts. It's a passing league, and the Eagles pass so much better than a team like the Cowboys do. Or at least I haven't yet to see a season like Jalen Hurts had last year out of Dak Prescott.
Yeah, and I get that. I do. But I just think with the amount of players that are questionable heading into next season on if they can even afford these guys, because not only, they don't have a ton of cap flexibility, but the thing is that they have to pay Jalen Hurts too. That conversation is now coming up for Philadelphia and getting that Hurts extension in place. And yeah, I just think, I think if they lose Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Javon Hargrave potentially, or if they lose, 2 of those 3, I think that's going to be damaging. If they lose, 1 or 2 of James Bradbury, CJ Gardner-Johnson, I think that could be damaging. I think that there's a lot of questions to address for this roster going into next season, where I still think it's going to be very talented, especially because they have that young quarterback in place and they have those receivers. I just think that's going to be a question heading into next year.
Yeah, but I think that, isn't this a team that kind of is built for letting those guys walk? They're kind of built in a sense of like, they went out. Like, I think a great example is Jordan Davis was very good in a very small role last year. I don't know how big his role can be, but it feels like he can have a bigger role now that there's going to be kind of more snaps available for him, right?
I definitely think he could step in for Cox, but at the same time, I look at both sides of the line of scrimmage where they might have had the best offensive and defensive line combination in the league. You know, you could potentially be looking at it. What, 5 new starters along those 2 groups alone? Like that feels significant.
Sure, but it's still going to be good though, is my thing, right? I think it'll take a step back, but I think that this passing it offense with their offensive line taking a step back, their defensive lines taking a step back, and their coverage taking a step back, I kind of trust the Eagles front office. That's another thing, is I do trust this Eagles front office more than I trust the Cowboys front office to build and to be able to at least patch up some of those. And if they can, like, let's say they just get the coverage under control. And then the offensive line's a bit spotty now, and the defensive line's a bit spotty now, but still has stars on it. To me, that still is a team that can contend for a championship.
It's definitely possible. I think those guys were way too important for their team, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how this offseason addressed, how some of these older players come back too, because I think a thing like if Jason Kelsey doesn't come back, that's probably the most damaging thing of any team this offseason, outside of Brady leaving like Tampa.
Yeah, well, again, that might be a bit of a hot take, but it would be very impactful. I definitely agree there. We also have a chat saying interested to know where Kyle has the Giants. I might have some bad news for you, but let's move on to number 7. We could do a whole podcast on that, but we have to move on. Got 32 teams to get to. Kyle, number 7.
All right, I will go ahead and, I mentioned it. I teased it a little bit in last week's podcast. Let's go ahead and just throw them in the fire right here. The young upstart Jacksonville Jaguars. Let's go ahead and throw them into the conversation. This is a team that won the AFC South. I think that they should win the AFC South again. Based on the talent, the teams that are in the AFC South, I think they should be the favorites heading into the offseason. And you know what? This is another one where it's if Trevor Lawrence makes another leap, if he makes a leap into that top 7 conversation for quarterbacks, all of a sudden you have that guy on the cheap, you have some cap space, you have some draft capital, then all of a sudden this could be a very, very good team and a dangerous team to some of those top teams.
Yeah. They're a team that, one of the things where you look through their free agents that they have to sign, and it's, some of these might be addition by subtraction in a way, like Jawan Taylor, who, Kyle, you're going to have to explain to me Jawan Taylor. I don't get, someone who was a hyped up prospect coming out of the draft has really struggled, I feel like, every time I've watched him play. And now, he's getting projected for like these $15 million a year deals. So I think that you want to avoid that one if possible. Listen, Evan Ingram, he was a solid player for you. Arden Key, he's been a really nice find for you. He was very good last season. There's guys that I like on this roster that they could lose, but no one major, and they're getting Calvin Ridley back, or getting Calvin Ridley just to begin with. That feels like whatever. They're the first team to improve this offseason, and they haven't even begun.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a few of these guys will come back. I kind of imagine Evan Ingram, based on how much he's had to bounce around, he probably wants to settle in here, especially after a good season, And I just think that they have so many guys that it's just like I'm just projecting leaps out of alone. Like, I think, once again, the value of the draft pick was bad. I think Travis Etienne is going to be very good.
Right.
I think, guys like Devin Lloyd's going to get a lot better. I think even if this is, and we talked about it, even if Trayvon Walker's just marginally better, that's a plus. But they're also kind of built to withstand kind of that flop because they have so many young players that I think are talented on this team. So I think they got a lot of things that they can do in a lot of ways to continue to improve this season.
Yeah. And like you said, when you talk about the quarterback, if Lawrence takes that next step, there's definitely things that you can get excited about. I guess the only thing I would maybe push back a little bit on, I had him number 10, so I had a couple teams ahead. And the only thing I'd push back a little bit on is there are teams that I feel like I've seen it a little bit more than with the Jaguars, who, it's worth mentioning, they got very hot towards the end of the year. Did go 9-8 last year. It's not like they were awesome last year, but again, they got hot. We've seen the flashes, and if they can get those flashes consistently, I agree. They're a team that has a chance.
Yeah. So they're definitely going to be in the conversation. I think it just comes down to how they perform this offseason, how they continue to improve this roster. And then a lot of it is going to come down to the players, I think, on the team that are all young and really talented and we have expectations for. How do those guys improve?
Yeah, definitely. Let's move on to number 8, which was number 6 on my board. I have the Baltimore Ravens here, Kyle. I think, am I crazy in being high on the Baltimore Ravens a little bit? Now, again, this is a best case scenario situation, right? Because obviously there's the concern of if Lamar Jackson walks, well, then they're screwed. Then they're not doing this. They have $24 million in cap space. So if they're going to pay Lamar, they're going to have to, find some ways to move some money around. They do have a couple of cuttable contracts that could be maybe save 15 to 20 million. That could get you close there. The idea is basically if you can get Lamar Jackson, or keep him, or maybe even franchise tag him, you have talent elsewhere. You have a team that last year, when Lamar was healthy, was up there with, the one thing we just kept talking about the Ravens is why did they keep blowing these games they should win? Like, that was their only real issue, was why did they keep having these games that they should win and then they're not? But the reality is, this is a team that was consistently, in it. They were a team that looked the part. Certainly, I get it. The Ravens, they can't seem to get this done. But I guess the idea is if we can get, I thought Lamar was on his way to having his second best season as a pro last year until the injury again. And that's kind of why I'm a bit higher on them than maybe other people are.
I think I agree too. And I think the last 2 years he has had stretches where he's looked as dominant as ever. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just been the health aspect. And yeah. So, I do think if Baltimore is back on this, if Lamar is back on Baltimore, I agree. They're in the top 10. Obviously, we should approach this as Lamar Jackson is coming back. Because if he's not back, this team,
it's over.
Yeah, they're in the 20s. So,
mm-hmm.
This is still a really good team. This is still a really well-coached team. And I just think that's going to be fine. The one thing I want to see this offseason, I know they got to address the Lamar thing. Can they put offensive skill position around him? That's the one thing I want to see. We've had enough of this Greg Roman offense. Can we put offensive skill position around him and really try to maximize not only his arm, his legs are always going to be good. He's going to be the best running quarterback in the league for the next 5 years as long as he's healthy. Maybe besides Justin Fields. Those two are the top two, right? He's going to be that good at that. Can we maximize his arm as well and maximize his passing game with this team? That's the only question I have because I think that's going to be what it takes to take the next leap.
Yeah, I think so as well. And, the receiving core has slowly gotten better. It was PFF's 7th lowest graded receiving core last year, which is a big improvement from what they've been used to.
And Bateman was so good when he was healthy last year. I think that was something that was kind of overlooked last year because Lamar was dealing with his own injuries by the end of the year. That team was a lot different when Bateman was out there, with his size and speed. He was dominant for them for stretches early in the season. And they looked, I keep going. I look at that Dolphins game they had earlier in the year. I look at that Patriots game earlier in the year where, they lost the Dolphins game, but the offense looked awesome those 2 weeks. And I just want to see that back.
Yeah. Again, this is the team. We talk about the Bengals at number 2. They're kind of the clear-cut number 2. This team had the Bengals basically dead to rights in a playoff game and then just blew it.
Yeah. They had the opportunity, that's for sure.
With a backup quarterback.
With Pro Bowler, but
right. Fair. Mm-hmm.
That is the question. So I'm with you on this one. This team was in the spot for me as well. The only tough thing is you're dealing with, I think, one of the toughest divisions of football, as we're going to talk about these other 2 teams here shortly, I imagine. Mm-hmm. And you're dealing with a difficult conference too, where it's going to be 3 tough games for Baltimore potentially to win if they're not winning that division.
Yeah. All right. Number 9. Where are you going?
I can't quit this guy. Yes. Let me just, just give me the Packers.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I think that this is a team that struggled a lot early in the season, struggled to really find its identity with this new look team. I thought they were playing pretty good football by the end of the season. Then Rodgers was dealing with an injury, but I thought they were playing pretty good football to end the season, and their free agents aren't extreme. Like Adrian Amos is their best free agent. You know, I
Hmm.
don't think that's necessarily a big deal to try and address. So I think this
Alan
team's
Lazard disrespect.
yeah, a little bit. That's fine.
Uh huh.
You know, this team has a little bit of cap money to mess with, and they have good draft capital too. I think this team's going to be better next season. Now that they kind of figured out how to operate in this post Devontae Smith or Devontae Adams world, which once again, this is similar to the Ravens. If Aaron Rodgers is not on this team, go ahead and write them off now.
Right.
But under the assumption that Aaron Rodgers is on this team, I'll take the Packers in this spot. I think Christian Watson's a guy I gave a first round grade at wide receiver. I think that he's going to be very good next season. I think he came on strong by the end of the year, and I think this team's going to be a lot better.
Yeah, I had the Packers at number 7 on my list. They were also next up on my board. I'm with you. The only thing that concerns me a little bit is we've seen this front office do some wonky stuff, and I do kind of feel like though at a certain point, uh, you know, the fan base is starting to turn. I think at a certain point they're going to say, you know what, let's not neglect the receiver position. I think an issue is there isn't really a great receiver out there, and I could see this being a scenario where they say, okay, don't worry, we got Alan Lazard back. Don't worry, guys, we're okay. You know, we paid him $15 million a year. We're good.
Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb are back.
Yeah, I think again, which I think Aaron Rodgers. It seems like that's one of his guys, Alan Lazard. Every now and then he has a player who he's like, this guy is the guy.
Yeah, and Cobb is definitely that guy for him. So,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, this team, I think it's going to be fine. And I don't know, like it's a team that, even though it doesn't draft receivers historically outside of Christian Watson, they do draft pretty well.
Yeah.
And they got picks. So I just think that between the picks, the cap space, the personnel already on the team, like I think this is going to be, I think they're going to figure their stuff out from last season. And I just, if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, I think Aaron Rodgers is still an elite quarterback. I still think Matt LaFleur is a really good coach, even if it didn't go that well last season. I think it's going to be figured out.
Yeah. Speaking of quarterbacks who have shown that they can be elite, that is where I'm going with my number 10. I'm going to Cleveland Browns here, Kyle. And this is one of those, it all comes down to the quarterback. If Deshaun Watson plays like we've seen him play in Houston, this is a team that should be a championship contender. Now, we didn't see it last year. I know you were more forgiving of his play than I was last year, but I think we both agree he was rough last year. He did not play well in the 2022 season. Now, maybe with more playing time, he can return to form. They have some free agents, but nothing massive, and they have a little bit of money to work with. They can re-sign anyone they want. It's just a decision. This is a team with a lot of talent. The defense didn't play up to what you expect it to play, but again, defense can be fluky. This is a team that has talent around Watson, and if Watson is a top 3 quarterback like he has been in the past, this is a team that could win a Super Bowl.
Yeah. The one thing, they're going to have some questions, I think, internally this offseason about what's happened the last 2 years. Obviously, the quarterback situation last year was tough to deal with. But, Stefanski, 2 years ago won Coach of the Year? He was kind of the darling of the NFL. This team was the darling of the NFL. And then the last 2 years, it's feel like it's fallen a little short, right? So I just want to know what's happened and how they're changing going into this offseason. Because, this roster on paper is still incredibly talented. We think Deshaun Watson's going to be a lot better, which he should be now that he has a full offseason, all that kind of stuff. So on paper, this should be a lot better. Why hasn't it been better? That's my question.
Yeah. I think that's fair. To me, I would say it's the quarterback play. That's probably the main thing I would bring to. And again, and why is the quarterback play been that way? That's maybe another discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's all going to be kind of brought into question, I think, this season. But at the same time, I just think it's a team that it's a roster that I think is too talented to fail at times. But
yeah,
maybe Watson isn't as good next season as we're expecting.
Sure. There's a chance that the Browns suck next year too.
Yeah. Which, I mean, could you imagine that contract fully guaranteed if he's, not good anymore?
Yeah. Broncos fans can.
Yeah. They would fit right at home there, right?
Yeah, those 2 teams. Yeah, there you go. Let's move on. Number 11, Kyle, where are you going?
Another one.
Can't pick the Cowboys again.
Can't pick them again.
No.
I kind of teased this team last week. Let's just go ahead and bring it full circle with this again. I'll go ahead and take the Steelers here.
Okay.
I think this is another roster I think is pretty good. Like, I think
Hmm.
that, they got some things to address on defense, but at the same time, like, I think Kenny Pickett's going to get better next season. I like their skill guys. I think we're going to see a leap out of George Pickens. They have the 12th most draft capital in the NFL heading into next season. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is a team that is going to be pretty good heading into next season, and I'm not too worried about their future. So, yeah, I think that this is going to be a pretty dangerous team.
This is a team that I had at number 12 on my board. A couple teams I had ahead of it. So, it feels like I'm a bit surprised, but I'm not stunned that they go here. One thing worth noting is we now have the entire AFC North gone in the first 11 picks. Pretty crazy to see how much of a dogfight that division could be. A big, again, the quarterback always comes down to the quarterback. Kenny Pickett, if he can take the next step and continue to progress, that's a way that they could be a Super Bowl contender. We know what Mike Tomlin can do, and they're a team that want to have no cap space. Again, Cameron Sutton and Larry Ogunjobi, they're only only key free agents, really. So this is a team that they can, they have room to improve. And part of the improvement is just the young guys playing and getting a full season out of TJ Watt. I like this take.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this team's going to be in the conversation. The only thing you can knock him is that if Kenny Pickett hits a sophomore slump or really just kind of stagnates a little bit, which is possible, I guess, given his age. But at the same time, I think we saw enough flashes out of him that he's going to be pretty good. And then the second thing is just that this division, as we just mentioned, because we have 4 in the top 11,
Yeah.
is a gauntlet. And how does this team that's still pretty young for what we usually expect out of a Steelers team, how does this young team handle that kind of adversity?
I have to say, I'm kind of ready for the Steelers to be back. Put them in the playoffs again. I missed them.
Well, they were in the playoffs 2 years ago.
I guess, but were they?
It was a sad Ben Roethlisberger game, that's for sure.
Yeah. No, but you know what I mean. Put them. I feel like, well, what? Because the past 3 years, if I remember correctly, last year they just missed the playoffs. Year before they made it and got crushed by the Chiefs, and then the year before they made it and got crushed by the Browns. I want the the old Steelers back.
Yeah. I could see it coming back this season. I really could. I'm pretty high on this team so far. Obviously, there's a long offseason ahead of us, but I do like what they have.
Speaking of liking what they have, people in the comments can stop bugging us about the Dolphins. There were 9 on my list. They go here at 12, though. Again, I feel like I don't want to give the casual thing of just talking every team about the quarterback, but that is the most important thing. And you have to be a little concerned about Tua's health, given what happened last year. And that's a big. I think if Tua was healthy all of last year, we would be feeling a lot better about them. I still like this team, though. I mean, again, the Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Tua stuff, when it was working with Mike McDaniel, it was legitimately rivaling the best offenses in football. They were a championship contender before all these injuries. Now, again, are you going to re-sign Mike Gesicki? You have a little bit of cap issues to worry about, but nothing major. I think this is a team that I feel like we probably are sleeping a little bit with them being at 12 on this list.
A little bit, but yeah, I mean, I do think this, this quarterback thing is going to come into question. How healthy is Tua? And then, I don't know, I imagine they're going to decline his 5th-year option, right? This offseason. And how does that play in his psyche heading into the season, given his injury history, too? I think there is some questions with that. But yeah, I mean, I still think, this team's talented. This team's really talented on offense. I expect a bounce back season. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be mostly fine. There's just some questions I have about them, but overall, this is the second best team in the AFC East. This team should be in a wild card spot. The question is, can Tua stay healthy? Can Teron Armstead stay healthy? Because that's a really important thing. I thought for them last year, too, along with Tua. And just, can that all kind of click heading into the season?
Yeah, and one thing, too, is one of the best additions of this of the offseason, Vic Fangio, the defensive coordinator for the Dolphins. I assume that should help them a ton.
I assume it should help them a ton. They have a couple guys they need to address. I thought Melvin Ingram was good for them last season, and that's someone they're going to have to bring back. That Byron Jones contract and that whole story is just kind of a bit of a problem for their cap space because they can't really cut them. There's still a lot of dead money there. So yeah, I mean, but I think theoretically, we say coverage year to year can be a little wonky. This team talent wise has a ton of talent in coverage. And they have one of the best defensive coordinators in football now. So, yeah, that should help a ton.
Yeah, definitely. Number 13, Kyle, where are you going?
All right, let's continue. Another team I teased last week. Let's keep it moving. Detroit Lions, cap space, draft capital, talented offense. They kept their coordinator, which I thought was a huge thing for their offense as well. I'm buying into the Lions as a playoff team next season. I'm not buying into them as potentially, what do they have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 13th highest Super Bowl odds. That seems like a bit of a stretch, but this
We
is
have
a
them at
really
13 though. That seems about right.
wow, that's crazy, actually. Okay. I don't know. It just seems weird to say on paper, I guess. Detroit Lions, 13 best odds to win the Super Bowl. But yeah, I mean, this is this is a team that showed some stuff last season. They got a couple free agents to address, but nothing major, and I think they're going to be pretty good again next season.
Yes, I do. I think that's one of my favorite moments ever for you to complain about the odds having them at 13 when we also have them at 13.
Yeah. I mean, some of these are crazy. I mean, like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are ahead of them too, which, that's
Okay, that's insane. Yeah, that's
yeah.
wild. Again, 22 million in cap space. The only notable free agent that they have on the top 200 PFF free agents is DJ Chark, who I liked in that offense last year. I thought that he did a good job, kind of being the one guy who could win on the outside relatively consistently. I'd want to bring him back if I was Detroit. Once he kind of came back from the injury down the stretch, I thought he played well. But they have money. The question that you brought it up last week. We don't have to rehash all of it, but just the Jared Goff question: can you win a Super Bowl paying Jared Goff over $30 million a year? You can get to a Super Bowl with him on a rookie deal. We know that, but can you win a Super Bowl that way? That is the question. But this team is loaded with talent around him, and you still have young players who does Aiden Hutchinson take the next step and become a defensive player of the year candidate? That's possible. That's on the that's a possibility. Does Jameson Williams come in and look like an elite outside receiver? That is possible because he didn't do much last year. He was injured, and obviously we didn't expect much from him last year. But could he, now that he has a full training camp and everything, return to form? There's so much potential with this team, but the question is always going to be the quarterback situation.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is a question. I mean, he's not terribly expensive, I think, in terms of, modern quarterback money. I mean, he is a little pricey, but I do think they can restructure that to open up a little bit more cap space if you want to do that. That's the question. And I don't know. This team's still pretty solid around him, and I think it's a pretty quarterback friendly scheme, pretty quarterback friendly offensive line, quarterback friendly skill position. And yeah, I think the one thing I'm worried about the Lions this season is do they take their little bit of success they have and take it a little too far? I like the idea of them bringing back DJ Chark, and I like the idea of them bringing back Jamal Williams, but do they overpay these guys for what they did last season? That would be my worry.
It's totally fair. Last year was fun. This does happen sometimes where you have this team that, I remember as a Tampa Bay fan, we did this a couple times where we were a win away from making the playoffs the year before. And then it's okay, here we go. Next year, now's our year. And then we just implode. It doesn't always work the way you expect it to.
Yeah. So that is a question, I think, for the Lions. And, does Goff regress? I think is a question. That was a kind of an outlier season bit from Jared Goff. So I think that there is some questions there, but at the same time, I really like what they're doing. It seems like this coaching staff is really good too. And they got, the draft, their third highest draft capital in the NFL, along with some cap space and some talented players already on the team. I really like what they're doing.
Yeah, and I do as well. I had them at number 12 on my board. Number 14 on this list, number 13 on the board. I'm going to the Jets here. Jets have no cap space and no real quarterback. So, other than that, they're fine. The quarterback thing, it really is the issue of who is going to be the quarterback. Do you go with a Garoppolo? Do you go with you try a Derek Carr? They've apparently been very interested in Derek Carr. They do have a couple of lineman free agents, nothing major, but George Fant, Connor McGovern, Sheldon Rankins. Those are guys that I'm interested in what they do. But again, team with a lot of really good, young, talented players. They had 3 first-round picks last year, so they have the ability to kind of improve. And if they can get kind of just a solid quarterback, is this a team that could get into the playoffs as maybe a 4 seed, but then go on a run?
Yeah, I think the potential, the unknown potential, is what's most tantalizing about the Jets, right? what if they land one of these guys? What if they land a Aaron Rodgers? What if they land a Derek Carr? What if they land, I mean, even Jimmy Garoppolo, I think, would be an upgrade, right?
Hmm.
So, if they land one of those guys, if they keep all their good players, that defense was very good last season. Does it all of a sudden all work out? It still feels like a little bit of projection, and obviously because they don't have the quarterback, it's a big question for me. But yeah, I mean, the potential unknown is what's most tantalizing for the Jets, and I get that.
Yeah, I guess you could also argue, like, will Sauce Gardner be just as good next year? Is he legitimately just like a Hall of Fame player, or did we talk about coverage being fluky? There always is that concern as well.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's I think he's really good. He was really hot on my board, obviously, but at the same time, it's not a it's not always perfect. It's not nobody's ever this good this often this quickly. So it could could there be a little bit of a slip up? Is a possibility.
Yeah. All right, Kyle, number 15.
All right, keeping it rolling here. I am gonna go with um I will take the Seattle Seahawks here. Um,
Okay.
they have to address the Geno thing, which it seems like they want to bring Geno back, which makes sense. But this is a team that has A, cap space, and B, the second highest draft capital in the NFL this season. And I think they had some really good young players perform last year. So yeah, I think that this team's building towards something, and I think they got pretty good pieces around them. Obviously we're getting to the point where we don't really view these teams as Super Bowl contenders, but at the same time, if this is a playoff team again next season, I wouldn't be shocked whatsoever. I think it's a talented team that's on its way up.
Yeah, I get it. I think my concern a little bit is what I have cap space. They're going to use all of it if they're keeping Geno, right? And they're probably going to get into the negatives by keeping Geno, and so that's the issue. Is if you lose Geno, you're screwed, I think. But if you keep him, I don't know if they have the talent around. And you're right, they have the draft capital, but it feels like they're really going to have to nail some of these draft picks. But again, number 15, this feels about right. I had them at 20, but I don't hate them at 15.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think, sure they're going to pay Geno Smith, but if Geno Smith's good again, that's a good thing,
Yeah.
It's and I think he can be good. It didn't feel watching him play, it didn't feel fluky, right? It wasn't like a
Right.
Carson Wentz kind of season. It felt pretty real. Now, could there be a regression? Possibly, but he felt like a real thing. And I think that's something that they can take into next season. And that division's bad outside of San Francisco. So, he could get some wins on the schedule from that too.
Yeah. Although rarely does it feel like, that quarterback had a good season, but it was fluky. Like Carson Wentz, we thought was good when he played.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. But I would bet on Geno Smith working out as well. It feels more like Ryan Tannehill than like a flash in the pan, than a Case Keenum.
Yeah. And, what if Jamal Adams is awesome next season? Coming back?
Yeah.
This is the defense that I thought at times played okay, and then at times played very bad.
Right.
And so what if they get some sort of old Jamal Adams thing and add him to that secondary, which is young and talented? All of a sudden, that might be a little bit of something to build with too.
Yeah. I'm going to go for division rival for number 16, Kyle. They were number 14 on my board. Give me a team that I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about with them. The Los Angeles Rams, who are a team that are 2 years removed from winning a Super Bowl and don't have that many different personnel guys here. Now, they have a few things, but, the biggest issue they had last year was injuries. That wasn't the only issue they had last year. They had plenty of other issues, but the biggest one was injuries. We talked about how the depth was a big issue. The Rams have never been a great depth team. Felt like the Super Bowl win was the one year that their depth kind of came through. And then also they had Stafford. That was the other thing. The one year they've had him because he was hurt last year. If Stafford comes back and is Matt Stafford, if Cooper Kupp comes back and is Cooper Kupp, if Aaron Donald comes back and is Aaron Donald, and if they don't trade Jalen Ramsey, this is still a team that has the best top 3 non-quarterback players in football by a good margin, with Ramsey, Donald, and Kupp.
Yeah, and Stafford's still a pretty darn good quarterback too.
Right. Who we trust in the playoffs.
Yeah, he's not elite, but he's pretty good. The one thing is, I think that depth's going to take a little bit more of a hit this season too. Like, I don't know, there's not a ton of cap flexibility there, and like I think A'Shawn Robinson's good, and I think he's going to get paid.
Yeah.
I think they could lose A'Shawn Robinson. I think they could lose Troy Hill, who I think is another decent player. They already cut Bobby Wagner, who I thought was pretty good for them last year too. So I think that there's questions about, how do they fill out this roster? And I still think they have the very same issues that they had at the beginning of the year last year, where I think this offensive line's bad. And I think this, receiving core outside of Cooper Kupp is bad. How do they address that when they don't have a ton of cap flexibility? They are 26th in draft capital. How does that get fixed?
It'll be tough. It'll be a little tough. Yeah, listen, I'm not, they're 16th though. They're in
Yeah.
top half.
Yeah, they are in the top half. So I guess that makes sense. But
Yeah.
it's just if everyone's healthy, but at the same time, these guys are getting older. It's not that easy to necessarily stay healthy as you get older. And then not to mention, it's, this is a team, like you said, that isn't really built to, be a deep roster. And it takes one or two injuries away from them potentially to slip back down.
Yeah. We have Scott B in the chat says, so did the Lions win the Stafford trade? No, clearly not.
No.
The Rams, until the Lions win a Super Bowl out of it, the Rams, their issues don't seem that bad because they just won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. So they're perfectly fine with it.
Right. Number 17, Kyle, bottom half of the teams. Where are you going?
I'll take the Patriots at this point.
All
Why
right,
not?
let's go.
Get my guys in here. Yeah, I mean, this team has draft capital. They are 10th in draft capital. They have decent amount of cap space. And I just think things are going to be better than last season, where it seemed like from June up through the end of the season, everything in the Patriots was a disaster. And it just seems like that everything was immediately addressed this offseason when it comes to offensive play calling, when it comes to structure of this coaching staff. That was immediately addressed and fixed. They went and, made sure Gerard Mayo did not go anywhere. And it seems like he's going to be the future coach of this team whenever Bill Belichick wants to retire. They went and got Bill O'Brien as an offensive coordinator, which, he was awesome when he was the offensive coordinator for the Patriots. He was a good coach for the Texans. He was bad at everything else. So, yeah, I think that's going to work. And I think that stuff's going to work. And I think this team's going to be a lot better in the future and going into this next season.
Yeah. No, I actually had the Patriots right at 17 on my list, interestingly enough. A couple teams still on the board that I had ahead of them. But they're a team that I could see doing it. I mean, you're right, like you said, just having an actual offensive coordinator out there should help with things. That should make things better. It should make things easier on Mac Jones. There is a way that you can talk yourself into this. Again, they're one of those teams that we've seen have, if Mac Jones can be rookie Mac Jones and you're not paying him too much, there's things to like about him. There's some free agents they have to sign. Jacoby Myers, Jonathan Jones, Isaiah Wynn, Devin McCourtney. Do they sign any of those guys? I don't know. But do they need to sign any of those guys? I don't know either, because they're the Patriots and they do things differently.
Yeah, Jones is obviously the one that would be like, it feels like it's important. I'm just never betting on this team to not find cornerbacks. Like They just, sprout on trees in New England, I guess. McCourty's another one where, I mean, he's not going to play anywhere else if he comes back. He's coming back to New England. So it's him deciding if he wants to come back. But at the same time, there's another team with Adrian Phillips, with Kyle Duggar. They're pretty good at safety too. So, they have some flexibility in that secondary that I'm not too worried about it, no matter who comes back. I would like Myers back. And then it just comes down to, can they get a number one receiver next to Myers? Because I think he's a good number two. He's played too long as a number one. They need to address that.
Yeah, I think I agree with all that. Kyle, I mean, you had the Patriots as a dark horse team, but now you're putting them at number 17 on the list. What's going on?
Well, I had a couple teams lower. I had the Jets lower. I had the Rams lower. So I had them in that top half. I wouldn't be surprised if they're a playoff team next season. So that's where I kind of had them.
Okay, well, we'll see what does happen. Number 15 on my list, number 18 on our list. I have the Chargers here, which a little surprised, to have negative 20 million in cap space. I'm a little surprised to see the Chargers this low on the list. I kind of get it, but they have Justin Herbert. They should have Mike Williams and Keenan Allen healthy this year, which would be a big difference. They now have an actual, Kellen Moore at offensive coordinator. That should help out a lot, I would assume. This is a team that I feel like could do something. And if they can maybe even get a third option this offseason, there's reason that you can talk yourself into this. I'm sure Chargers fans won't be thrilled with their placement here.
Yeah, I think if you're betting on the Chargers, you're betting on Herbert. I mean, it comes down to that. It's a we're going to do our quarterback rankings later in the offseason. I don't think I'm going to break any news to say he's going to go pretty high in that list.
Right.
You know, and that's what you're banking on. I don't know if this team can stay healthy. That's the thing. And then, I just look at I look at their group of guys, and I think JC Jackson should be better next season. That Khalil Mack obviously worked out. So yeah, I mean, this is probably a little low for the Chargers, but we had expectations for them last year and they kind of flopped. Can they exceed those expectations next season?
Right. To me, they can, but part of the reason why they are so low is like you said. We've seen too many issues with them just pop up so far.
Yeah, and I don't know. We're also going to do our coaching rankings later in the offseason. I have questions about this coaching staff. I just do. And,
sure,
they made a decision to fire the offensive coordinator, which I think was a good one, but they didn't want to make wholesale changes to the coaching staff. This should be a group that's desperate coaching-wise, but is it good enough, I think, is also a question. Is this a good enough coaching staff and personnel department around their talented team?
Should be interesting. Well, let's move on. Number 19, Kyle. Where are you going?
Let me see here. Let me make sure I have this right. Yeah, I mean, I'll take the Giants. Why not? I'll take
okay.
Team. I think this is the lowest ranked playoff team heading into next season on our list here. Actually, no, it's not. Just kidding. We have another one still coming. But the Giants, they have cap money. I hope they don't pay Daniel Jones $45 million, but they have cap money. They have pretty good, fair draft capital, and this was already a pretty young team that did some good things. I'm interested to see how they kind of address the team the rest of the season.
Yeah. We actually have two playoff teams still on the board. One who I think will be there for a while. Kyle, the Giants, I am selling all the stock I have on the New York Giants. I had them at number 28 on my list. Wow. I am the resident Giants hater here, I suppose. So listen, $47 million. That might even be able to get you one Daniel Jones. This is a concern for me. I feel like they're going to pay Daniel Jones $40 million a year. They're going to pay Saquon Barkley double-digit millions of dollars a year, and it's going to blow up in their face. I just see that coming, and I'm concerned about it. It feels like more often this team ends up imploding instead of getting better.
That's fair. Yeah, that is this franchise's MO. Like, I have thoughts of what they think they should do. Like, I think they should just let Saquon, thank you for your service. Good luck wherever you go next.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess they might overpay for him, knowing that he's their guy. I don't think an exclusive tag would be the worst decision in the world for Daniel Jones either.
Mm-hmm.
And try and get him for a little bit cheaper for 1 year and say, okay, go do that again, see what happens. But yeah, I mean, this is a team that, it could blow up in their face if they go crazy this offseason. But obviously we don't know that yet. If they make sound decisions, I still think this should be a decent team. Like, I don't think the bottom's going to fall out. I think it's well coached too. So I'll buy a little bit of the stock, even though I don't know if they're going to be as good as last season at times.
Sure. And again, part of it too, just to defend my take a little bit, I don't think it's crazy that the Giants could be solid next year. That's not what I'm saying. I just think their chances of, it's kind of one of those things where it's like some of these teams that were bad last year, I almost feel like have more room to grow just because they're not going to be in this weird, do we pay our running back $10 million? Do we pay our, let's be honest, mediocre quarterback $40 million?
Right. Yeah. And I think that's fair. And I think that if the Giants are level-headed about this, I think things will be fine next season. If they go crazy in off-season free agency, re-signing these guys, then yeah, I'm concerned because I don't like paying a running back $10 million unless it's like Christian McCaffrey. And Saquon was good last season, but he has the injury history, and I don't think he's Christian McCaffrey either. Daniel Jones, I thought, played well last season. I don't know if that makes Daniel Jones a $40 million quarterback.
Right. Yeah. I love the coaching staff, though. So that could be maybe the X factor. Again, could spend a whole podcast on them. But let's move on. Number 20 on my list. This is an interesting team, and you could argue they should be significantly lower. I'm going to go with the Titans here at number 20. This is a team that it seems like they're going to keep Ryan Tannehill, and I do think they make the playoffs last year if Ryan Tannehill stays healthy. I think that they do, which is, again, kind of an interesting thought experiment of does that mean the Jaguars don't make the playoffs then? I guess so, which means we don't view the Jaguars as highly as we do. But they do not make the playoffs. They do have a couple of free agents like Nate Davis, David Long, and Austin Hooper are all free agents that, you'll look towards and would be losses if they walk away. But this is still a team that I kind of feel like the Titans are just like maybe just a better version of the Giants in a sense of like, yeah, their quarterback's not the best, but he's better than Daniel Jones. I think that would, I've always been more of a Tannehill guy than I think the average person, but I think he's better. More of a tier 2 quarterback. To have really good coaching staff, and they do tend to, to have a new GM, which I'm interested in seeing how that works. There are some issues on this team. I don't love this team, but I don't know. It just couldn't you see a scenario where all of a sudden they win like 12 games next year because they just coached their way into it?
Yeah, I think it's a good coaching staff that could do that, and it's pretty good.
And they have Derrick Henry.
Yeah, and pretty good continuity. The one thing, like we eventually think this Derrick Henry thing is going to end, right?
Right.
And is that
I'm
happening?
not betting on the Titans to win the Super Bowl. I'm just saying
right.
I could see a scenario. We're pick 20. I could see a scenario is where we're at now.
Right. No, I agree. So I think that there could be a scenario where this Derrick Henry thing finally falters a little bit. And I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, I thought we saw some decent things out of Treylon Burks in the little bit of time he played. He wasn't healthy last season. But I think this offense would be pretty bad if Derrick Henry's not healthy.
Oh, terrible. They need this is all contingent on we get an elite season out of Derrick Henry.
Right. So, yeah, I think that's a huge question mark in my book because he has been doing it so long. The miles are starting to catch up to him, I think. And, yeah, I think that's a big question, I think, for the Titans heading into the season. And I don't know, the changes in personnel and front office stuff, it was a little weird. And a lot of it was kind of weird timing. And I don't know if it just threw a little bit of a stink on this team that I can't quite 100% sell. But, yeah, I mean, I think that's a little bit of a question heading into this offseason.
Yeah, we have in the chat saying I would 100% take Kyle over Tannehill, even with Kyle's stress factor. So there you go, Kyle.
That's a mistake. I don't think Tannehill's bad. I think he's pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. Kyle, number 21. Where are you going?
All right. Where are we? Who's left? So looking at it, this is we're betting on something happening. This is basically betting on one particular scenario. What if Russell Wilson has a little bit of a bounce back season?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that the last few games, I mean, it was basically over at that point and they fired their coach, but I didn't think he was as atrocious as he'd been earlier in the season in the last few games. And what if they figured some of that stuff out and then all of a sudden, the Broncos are pretty good next season? They still have a really talented defense. And if that offense is just respectable, they lost a lot of one-score games. And, I think generally when you talk about one-score games, it's a little fluky. And if it's maybe this kind of bounces back a little bit their way a little bit. They get some luck. And they, with ace third wide receiver Tim Patrick in the fold, right, maybe the offense gets a little bit better, and all of a sudden this is a better team.
Yeah, this is a good one. I had them actually at number 21 on my list as well. I only have one team higher than them still left on my board. You're right. This is can Sean Payton save Russell Wilson? Which is a crazy sentence to say. Who would have thought 2 years ago we'd be saying that? But sure, why not, right? Who better to save Russell Wilson than Sean Payton? And if it does work out, the rest of the league better look out because of how good this Broncos defense was last year. If the defense can stay where it's at, which defense is fluky, who knows? But if the defense stays elite, if Russell Wilson plays like Russell Wilson and now he's in a Sean Payton offense, why couldn't the Broncos win the Super Bowl? Because that's what we're discussing here. I could see it.
Yeah, and there's not a ton of they don't have any big name free agents. I guess do they want to bring Kareem Jackson back?
Well, apparently Draymond Jones is going to get $15 million a year.
Huh. I don't know about that one, but okay.
Yeah,
that's
what I've seen on several sites suggesting $15 million a year. He had a good year 2020.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that one, but okay. Mm-hmm. I'd be okay with letting him walk, but at the same time, I don't know, Javonte Williams is going to be back healthy. I think that's going to help this offense too. Mm-hmm. I think that the question is, can they find a number one receiver? But at the same time, I still think they have Judy
Yeah, Judy was good last year.
Judy was good. I think Tim Patrick being healthy helps. I think Cortland Sutton's still pretty good. Like, it's not the worst situation to be in with this team. It's not great, but it's not the worst receiving core I've ever seen. So yeah, I mean, it's another one of those things where I just feel like if this offense can get to respectable, it's in a position to compete because this defense is so good. And I mean, you look at, Justin Simmons and Surtain are 2 stars and 2 young stars, talented stars. And so, yeah, I mean, that's something to build on going forward.
Yeah, it's a scenario you could see working out here at 21. 22, a team that one of the 2 remaining former playoff teams. I am now selecting the Minnesota Vikings, who are 24 million over the salary cap at this point, and have some free agents to sign as well. Not massively, but they have some guys that they're probably going to have to let walk. This offense is really good last year, and we called it the Fraud Bowl all year. But I did think that this sort of 3-headed monster of Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, and TJ Hawkinson worked for what it was trying to do. The defense could not get anything going. Maybe just the coaching changes could help with that, or just schematic changes in general, I should say, could help with that. As it didn't seem like the personnel was terrible last year, although it should get a little bit worse. But you have some young guys who could potentially step up. For 21, I feel like this isn't a bottom 10 team in terms of Super Bowl odds. They did win a ton of games last season. While it was a bit fluky, could they potentially retool a bit? Now, again, the Kirk Cousins thing, it's hard to win a Super Bowl paying that guy that much money. It just is. But I don't know. The offense was very good last year. Offense wins championships, and as fluky as defense is, if they can just patch that together, there's a route here.
Yeah. This is probably a little harsh, right? Like, I don't know, like with TJ Hawkinson or with Cousins, Jefferson, and Hawkinson, there feels like a floor to me at least. But I don't know. I think it's just the flukiness we saw of last season, of how lucky they got. You think this got to catch up with them a little bit. And like, I didn't love their defense last year. That's not a hot take. But I also didn't love their defense in Dalvin Tomlinson, who I thought was pretty good as a free agent. Patrick Peterson, who I thought was pretty good for, what they were paying him too, especially, was pretty good last season. And they got to address those guys and also try and retool this defense, which wasn't very good, despite those guys having pretty good seasons. So how does that all kind of work out for this Vikings defense? I do have questions about that.
Yeah, and I did have them as 18 on my board. It's just kind of one of those things where it fell a little bit further. Right. But yeah, I mean, there's kind of obvious things to like, obvious things to not like. And again, you can win a Super Bowl without having a great defense, but it's hard to win a Super Bowl with a bad defense.
Yeah, right. And it's especially hard when you don't have an elite quarterback. And while we both like Kirk, he's not elite, and that's a problem.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Number 23, where are you
going? Let's go with, you know what? We don't have an NFC South team on the board yet.
All right.
Someone's got to win the division. We talked about it last week. I guess I'll go ahead and take the Falcons first off the board.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I think they could address something. The question is going to be Desmond Ridder of it all. Can Desmond Ridder play better? But I mean, I think Kyle Pitts is going to be better. I think Kyle Pitts is a good prospect. I think Drake London showed something too. I think this is going to be a pretty good offense next season with those two, Tyler Algier, Cordarrelle Patterson. Those are all pretty good players. And, I just think that kind of works. And if they can figure out the quarterback of it all, I think it's going to go a long way. They got talented players there. They got 2 good corners, which, they played well to start the season. They didn't end the season terrifically well, but I think those are good players. So I just think that there's enough good players in key positions to say, I'm going to bet on Atlanta to be okay.
Yeah, we have in the chat, and they'll get Lamar Jackson. Yeah, I mean, that would definitely help with that. Caleb McGarry's kind of their most notable free agent, but they can franchise tag him. They should be okay there, and they have $67 million to do it. They could get a quarterback. I don't think they're going to stick with Desmond Ridder if they want to be competitive. Maybe they do it, and they just say, let's kind of sort of maybe punt a little bit on this season. Maybe they trade up and draft a guy. Like they're in position where they could consider doing that. The quarterback situation is the obvious question mark, but you're right. In terms of these kind of bad teams that are also quarterback lists, they feel like they'd have the best ability to build around a quarterback if they could get one quickly.
Yeah. Trade for Justin Fields? No.
Sure. Yeah. Like that.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely makes sense. So yeah, I just think, The toughest thing is the quarterback, and that is the hardest position usually to address in this game. They have to address it, but I don't know. I still think that there's some pretty talented players here, and they're building a little bit towards something. It's just, can they address that position? It's the hardest thing.
Right. Yeah. I think that's probably going to be it for a lot of that narrative is kind of going to be it for a lot of these teams, right? Like I don't know how much time I want to spend on the Falcons. We can go on to like I have the balls at number 23 on my list, number 24 total. Like, and they're kind of the same thing, right? A team where it's like, what can they do at the quarterback position? If this is the Sam Howell year, then probably not going to do great. But I don't know. If Sam Howell plays well, could this team potentially get something going? Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think that's a situation that could be, if he's good, if he's at least decent, I think that's something that definitely helps him. So, yeah, I think it could be something that is, it could help this team. I think it's still a pretty talented team. I mean, they kind of, I don't know. Did they feel like they fell a little, was last year considered a disappointment for Washington?
I don't know, because to me, I felt like all sort of the second half of the year, they were going to make the playoffs. To me, that felt like that was going to happen. And then just that stupid Giants game where the Giants just did what the Giants did all year, which is just win a game they had no business winning, which, there's a skill to that. But this team did feel like they were a playoff caliber team last year.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, too, is like, we've talked about we like to build through the outside. Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, the glimpses we saw, is a pretty nice combo, along with Curtis Samuel, too. So that's a pretty nice duo. I think we like the running back, too, and I think he's going to be pretty good. So, if they can figure out this quarterback spot, like you said, this is the narrative for a lot of these teams. This is the team that all of a sudden could leap maybe to the top of the NFC East. Is that a hot take?
You hate the Eagles. I mean, you think the Eagles are just going to win like 6 games next year.
Yeah, maybe. No, I'm just kidding. I don't think they're going to win the 6 games, but I mean, I do think there are some questions.
Okay. Well, what's your right now win projection for the Eagles?
10 to 11?
Okay. So you're not expecting much from them.
I mean, I don't know. I still think that's a pretty good season.
They just lost 1 game with their starting quarterback in the regular season and were a potential holding call away from winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, but at the same time, like that was last season. They,
Sure, you're right. That's fair.
I don't know what's going to happen throughout the rest of this. What if Jason Kelce retires? I think that's monumentally big. I do think that there's questions about that. So I don't think it's a 100% surefire thing year to year. Would we have bet the Rams to win how many games they won last season?
Sure.
At this point last year? So I don't
fair
think
enough.
It's a surefire thing.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Kyle, number 25.
All right. Let's, the one team down at this spot that I don't think has quarterback options, I don't think they do, quarterback question, sorry, is the Arizona Cardinals. Like, I don't know, like, I mean, look, there's still a lot wrong with this team, this franchise, and what they've done the last few years, but at the same time, like, I still think Kyler Murray is good. Is he perfect? No. Is he the perfect prospect? No, not at all. But I still think Kyler Murray is a pretty good quarterback. And if they have him and a healthy DeAndre Hopkins next season, if they keep Hopkins, like, I still think that's going to be a pretty, potent duo. So I'll just take the Cardinals here in this spot and say, why not? Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I love Kyler. I love Hopkins. My issue is the other 50 players on the roster.
Yeah. No, I get it. And I'm like, has any team drafted as bad as they have the last few seasons?
I'm trying to think. Who did it have?
I don't know. Like, I just feel like I look at their last few drafts and like, oh, that's a bust. I think Isaiah Simmons is better last season. I don't think Simmons is great by any stretch. And who's the linebacker? The guy I like too, Zaven Collins, hasn't really worked out either. And I don't know. I just feel like I go through their list and it's like, okay, that's a regrettable draft pick. That's a regrettable draft pick. I don't know.
They just want to trade a draft pick. It's like they got it for Hollywood Brown.
Yeah, exactly. So it's hasn't quite worked out, the draft picks the last few years.
Yeah, for past couple years, and it's hard if you can't draft well and not have a new coach. We'll see how it works. I'm a little bit lower in the Cardinals. I had them at 29 on my list. I think that they could, for the future. I'm not terrified by what's going on because you have the quarterback. You could be okay to sort of tank for a year. You have another draft pick. Hopefully, you hit on this one and kind of start to improve that way. But I think that they might need a year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, we are at 25, so we're not betting on any of these
Right.
teams to win the Super Bowl,
Sure.
right?
Hmm.
I just think if I look at some of these teams, what if, the teams around him, around them, what if they don't address quarterback? Like, I could see
Right.
them being better. I think if it's a bad quarterback in, just Chicago compared to Arizona, I think Kyler Murray is going to add a couple wins that a lot of these teams can't because they don't have that position filled.
Sure. I agree. Number 26, I have the Panthers, and I'm transitioning now because kind of my argument for why I had the Panthers ahead of the Cardinals is that I think the Panthers do have some talent, and it's like they have so much room to improve on the quarterback situation, right? Whereas the Cardinals, kind of the issue is we're expecting to be bad with great quarterback play. So it's hard. How much do you get better? The Panthers, we're expecting to be okay with bad quarterback play. So if they can get a Derek Carr or, maybe, I don't know, maybe Matt Corral comes out and has a great season, something like that, then that's a way that they could go from, from not very good last year, I guess, from solid last year to, but, again, talking about could they win a Super Bowl? That would be the way that they could do it.
Yeah. If you had to choose, if I gave you three doors here for the Panthers' future, would you prefer door one, Derek Carr, door two, standing pat and waiting for a Anthony Richardson, Will Levis to potentially fall to them, or door three, trading up and getting their number one quarterback and overpaying probably for the number one pick?
I think I'd probably choose number 3.
You take that over Carr?
I
I
think,
think
well,
over
because
two.
Carr you have to pay, like that's just the issue. Is again, like I said, the Derek Carr contracts rarely result in Super Bowl wins.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is like, I think everybody makes quarterback decisions based on their previous quarterback relationships.
Uh huh.
That's just kind of how it works. Like the Colts are definitely trading up for a quarterback this year because of
Right.
how many times they've gone for veteran quarterbacks and it hasn't worked out. They're
Right.
1000% in the market for a rookie quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
The Panthers are kind of in the same thing, but also at the same time, like they didn't pay like a crazy premium for Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield, right? And so like I don't think Carr's the most unrealistic option for them because I think they could be like, you know what? I think this guy's good. Where we took a chance on Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield. We know Derek Carr is a good quarterback. So I think that's something that could be an option. But I also could see like, listen, there was those 5 quarterbacks in the draft. We had a chance to draft a couple of them that year. We drafted JC Horn, who we like. It's time to go get our guy.
Sure. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what they do. Number 27, Kyle. Where are you going?
Got to look at who's left here. Give me the oh man. This is definitely not the cream of the crop of the NFL teams, right?
No. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I guess I'll go Saints. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's still good players on this roster, right? Like obviously the cap hell is, by their own doing is still a problem, but I don't know. They're probably going to move money around again because that's just kind of what they do. And this is another one where if they find a way to free up enough cap space to get a Derek Carr, like I don't think that's going to be the worst team in the world. Chris Olave seems like a good pick. So
Mm-hmm.
they have things that they can kind of do to get more competitive. And yeah, I don't think it's a crappy roster overall. So the quarterback is obviously the biggest question. So I'll just take the betting on some of the talent around the roster.
Yeah. If they get Derek Carr, you can just pen them in for the 4 seed, right? They're
Yeah.
going to win the division and not be better than any of the other division winners.
This is 10-7 written all over it with the
Yeah.
even if it's Jimmy Garoppolo, something like that.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think some notable free agents like Marcus Davenport's the big one. What are they going to do there? But they don't care about the cap. They don't care about being under the cap, whatever, over the cap, whatever. They'll make it work. They're going to re-sign Marcus Davenport and get Derek Carr. And just what the Saints do. And they actually have a decent amount of cash to work with this year too, which that's sometimes the better predictor than cap space is cash. So I agree with you. I had the Saints next on my board as well.
Yeah. So I just, I still think it's going to be a little bit of a problem to try and get out of this mess, and they're probably going to have to sell off some pretty good players.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I wouldn't be surprised if they're just, they continue to kick the can down the road a little bit and they're halfway decent next year.
Yeah. So 5 teams left. Number 28, I had them a couple higher on my board. I'm going to Chicago Bears. Chicago
Yeah.
Bears, who have the first overall pick, which they could use for a player. Probably might not go Jalen Carter now. I don't know. But they have $88 million in cap space and the number one overall pick and a quarterback who looked pretty good last year. I don't know how, he still has to improve on certain things, blah, blah, blah. We all know that. But, if you can use the money to build around Fields, if Fields does improve as a passer and can take the next step into being a very good player, and you use that draft pick wisely, maybe trade down and get a couple of starters. Are they going to win a Super Bowl? No, none of these teams are. But if we're doing the exercise, could they win a Super Bowl that way? Sure.
Yeah, I think they are going to use this effectively to, this number one pick is going to be used to add more talent. And while, my surefire lock as the best player in this draft is now arrested,
Right.
Jalen Carter, I mean, they're still going to get a pretty good player, I think, even if they trade down. And they're going to get more capital. The only thing is obviously why they're still so low, despite all this cap space, despite a young quarterback who showed a lot of promise last year and having a high draft pick, is that this roster was just so bad. And,
Yeah.
They can hit a home run this offseason and still have the worst roster in the league around quarterback, right? Like that. I just think that's a problem because they don't have receivers. They don't really have they don't have an offensive line. I mean, what else do they have that we can get really excited about? And I think that's a bit of a problem. So, yeah, I mean, I think they'll get better by default, but it still feels multiple years before we can take this team seriously.
Yeah, I think I agree. Number 29, where are you going?
I'll take the Raiders. Like, I think this team's going to be pretty aggressive in the rookie quarterback market. And you know what? Like, once again, it's another not perfect situation, obviously, but like they have cap space to add some guys. They have some bad players and bad contracts on their roster, but like even if they bring in a young rookie quarterback, like it's not bad to have Devontae Adams to help that out, right? So, yeah, I think like I wouldn't be surprised if they're competent next season. I mean, there are some questions, there are a lot of concerns, and obviously the quarterback is the biggest question. But having Adams and having Max Crosby on defense, they have guys, they have good players. That's the thing. So yeah, I have them here.
Yeah, I have them here as well. Definitely out of 4 teams left, they have probably I think you would argue they have the best stars left. The quarterback situation is a complete unknown. Is Jarrett Stidham going to be the guy? I don't know. Looked good in that one game, but maybe you draft a guy and maybe that guy comes in and wows you. Maybe Anthony Richardson fully develops. And you get him, and then he's able to be awesome right away year one. But I'm not betting on it happening. They have a little bit of cap space now with getting rid of Derek Carr, but this team feels like they're in a rebuild.
Yeah, it's going to be a couple of years, but there are nice pieces here. Like this isn't a talentless team. So yeah, I mean, I think that they could still be kind of competitive next season, and it's going to be interesting to see. The one thing is, could they tear the whole thing down, which I think is a possibility, but I still think that there's good players here.
Yeah. Well, from a team that we don't think is a talentless team to a team that we do, give me the Houston Texans at number 30. Houston Texans are not the bottom team for probably the first time in a while. I'll give me them at 30. They got a tad of cap space. How do they not have more cap space? I don't get. Anyways, number 2 overall pick. There's a chance that they're going to get either Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. And that's basically my mindset is because of that, they could potentially, do well with that, get a quarterback, and, you have basically not a ton on your roster. So you can potentially, plenty of areas where you can improve. It's probably not going to happen. There's, 3 teams left.
Yeah. I mean, the unknown potential of the quarterback is the most enticing thing about this team, where it could be really good, and they need this to work out, whoever they draft. So it's going to be interesting to see how they approach that, how it works out this offseason, because we don't know how good this guy's going to be, whoever they pick. But the next 5 years of this franchise is going to be riding on whoever they pick in this draft, right?
Yeah, and they have other draft picks as well. They're in an okay spot draft wise, so that's kind of why. But yeah, I mean it's all going to come down to really which quarterback do you draft and how well they do.
Yeah. So I mean, there's not much to say about the Texans. It's all about the quarterback, who they
Hmm.
pick. I mean, the one thing is like,
They're
do you
finally
move?
interesting again.
Yeah, there's something to talk about here. Do you
Uh-huh.
move up to number one? I think is the question.
Yeah, I still think no. I think you just say again. Maybe they love Bryce Young more than they love C.J. Stroud. There are some people that feel that way, and so maybe you do. But for me, there doesn't feel like a big enough gap that I would give the probably at least like a second round pick to have to make that jump.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
All right, Kyle. Number 31. You have two teams left. We have the Bucks and the Colts. One of them a playoff team. Which one are you picking, and then which one are you making 32?
I'll take the Colts.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
They have they're if I'm going to bet on the team to move up to the number one pick, that's who I'm betting on right now, right? This is a team that I think is going to be very aggressive in that department. And, if it works out, this all of a sudden could be a bounce back potential team because I don't think the offensive line's as bad as they performed last year. And I think Jonathan Taylor is still a pretty good running back, a very good running back. And so, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that stuff could go into kind of working out for this team. And I don't think it's going to be as good as we expected the last couple of years, but I do think by default that should help. And even it should help a young quarterback possibly develop too. So give me the Colts here in this spot.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm trying to remember what my logic was when I made my notes of why I put the Texans above the Colts. That one might have been a mistake by me.
Yeah, I think so. I had the Colts higher.
Yeah, I think that in hindsight, yeah. I mean, I could see it with the Colts. Right, they're totally going to get a quarterback, for sure. And I just feel like they're going to trade up and get a quarterback. And then okay, maybe if Jonathan Taylor returns to form, this is a team that's only a year removed from a playoff, or from a near playoff appearance. And then if you can get elite quarterback play out of nowhere, that's how it could work. But again, either way, not a ton of cap space, probably not going to happen. But could be in a better spot this year than you were last year.
Yeah. I feel like this might be a little low now that I'm looking at it. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know.
Yeah,
Like,
there's hope here. We were sleeping on the Colts.
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this is 9-18 next season. Like just straight up.
Mm-hmm.
If their rookie quarterback plays well, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a 9-win team.
Yeah, or maybe Sam Ellinger comes in.
Then I'm not betting on them.
Okay, well we'll see what happens there. Maybe Matt Ryan has a good year.
Yeah, I'm not betting on that either.
Okay. Also not betting on the Buccaneers doing much. The Kyle Trask led Tampa Bay Buccaneers. How the mighty have fallen, as a team that was in the playoffs is ranked 32nd. They're 56 million over the cap currently. Tom Brady, they're currently paying him over $30 million to not play for them as they push the can down the road. So, as much as they could, they did the right thing, went all in trying to win a second Super Bowl, didn't work out. But now it seems like they are in full rebuild year, which I'm in support of.
Yeah. I think the question is how far did they tear this thing down, right? Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. We're hearing a lot of talk about DeAndre Hopkins and T. Higgins. Like, I don't know. If I'm Tampa Bay, Mike Evans is 100% on the trade block for me, right? Like, I know he's maybe the best player in team history, or one of the best players in team history, but I don't know. That feels like something that probably should be talked about at this point, given the cap situation, given where this team's at. I wouldn't be surprised if Mike Evans is on a new team by the beginning of next season.
Yeah, I actually think it might just become not like an ownership thing or like a money thing of not wanting to do that, more so than a football sense thing of wanting to get rid of Evans. Just with, how's the fan base reaction going to be if you lose Tom Brady, potentially Levante David, and Mike Evans all in one offseason, like the three most liked players on the roster? Like that would be tough. I think they'd try to avoid that. But I could see, like, I don't know, maybe like a Chris Godwin might make more sense. He'd probably net more value anyway. There's guys you can trade on this roster, certainly. And they're actually in an okay spot, in terms of their cap is really only bad for 1 year. They kind of push it down the road in a way where it's all for 1 year. You kind of suck this year, and then your cap situation should be back, and you should be fine. And also, there's good quarterbacks in this upcoming draft. So sucking this year is not the worst year to suck. So I'm fully on board. Operation Tank here. I don't know. We have to come up with a new, the tank for Tua was the best, one of the best catchphrases. We got to come up with one of those. But
Fade for May.
Sure, there you go. I'm on board.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I don't even know what you could do for Caleb.
Yeah, can't win for Caleb.
Yeah, it doesn't have quite the ring to it.
No.
Fade for May
Oh,
is good. I mean, those two. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a year where you probably want to, decide pretty early if you want to go after a quarterback next year, because those two, I think those two are special. And there could be a third potentially. How he bounces back, we'll see. But yeah, I mean, they cut Fournette already, but yeah, I mean, I think that is the question: is like, do you just bite the bullet this season, knowing it's not going to be very good? Trade a couple of these guys, don't restructure contracts, and just kind of say next year will be better. I think that's probably that's probably the smart move, right? Just I don't know, like what is competitive for Tampa Bay this year if they restructure some of these contracts and go for it again?
Yeah, it just I don't know. The only thing I would say is like Todd Bowles probably isn't going to want to fully tank. I would assume because like, do you want to have kind of back to back very disappointing seasons? But it's probably the right move for the team. I like this comment of too high for the Bucs. Yeah, it's a bit high them at 32.
Yeah. It's crazy, right? Obviously losing Tom Brady is significant, so that would hurt.
But also part of it too is like they're saying like we feel good about Kyle Trask, and like they don't seem to be going after Derek Carr. Like it seems like this is a team that's content with just having a bad year. It seems like they almost kind of understand the importance of the quarterback position, and I think Jason Light probably just gets like he saw what happens when you have solid quarterback play versus elite quarterback play and the difference. And I think he's going to try to make sure that he either has terrible quarterback play or elite quarterback play.
What if Kyle Trask is awesome?
Then great. I guess that's the one way the Buccaneers win the Super Bowl. Oh man, imagine the takes if Kyle Trask wins the Super Bowl. Brady couldn't do it. Kyle Trask comes in. Turns out, system quarterback.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it would be pretty funny. I mean, obviously, we're not betting on that because we've watched Kyle Trask play, but I mean, you never know with some of this stuff. I didn't think Brock Purdy had that great of an arm. It worked out last season. So
yeah,
there's still like, depending on who they get rid of and who they keep, there's still some decent players in this offense. Maybe they can work out around it. I mean, that would be the one thing, but at the same time, I'm not betting on it. I'm not betting on Kyle Trask talent.
Yeah, and maybe they get like a Jacoby Brissett as to bring in a veteran, and he ends up playing well. You get into the playoffs with another like 8 and 9 year, and then are able to do something. I don't know. Not betting on it, but you could talk yourself into any of these teams potentially having a chance. That's what makes the NFL so fun.
Yeah, for sure. Not the Texans though. Still not betting on the Texans.
I don't know. They weren't 32 on either of our lists, or were they 32 on yours?
They were 31 for me. I had the Bucs 32. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, Kyle, that's our show. Bit of a long one here. Had a lot to get through. For a second, it looked like we were going to have a very long show. I think we were like a half an hour in and like 6 teams in. Sometimes we forget that we have we can't just spend 30 minutes on each team. Yeah.
We got through it eventually. We can power through some of these teams definitely. So we made it. I can't believe we're already at this point in the offseason. We're talking about next year's Super Bowl winners.
Yeah, I know. Next week, we have our show for next week already planned. Next week, it'll be, again, same time, Wednesday at 5. And we are going to be going over the every first-round draft pick, not every draft pick, but every first-round draft pick from last year and talking about, 1 year removed now, how do we feel about them?
Yeah. And I think next week's the start of free agency too, isn't it? Or is the 15th?
It's the 15th is when free agency starts. Although the legal tampering period starts the 13th, so that's when we'll get to know some of the we'll know a decent during the 15th when we do our show. Then we'll do a free agency breakdown of what's happened so far.
Yeah. So we got some news coming soon. Obviously, like you said, we're going to go through the draft last season and then start preparing for next season. So we're getting close to that kind of end of the lull period, and we're going to have some news here soon.
Yeah, so it should be fun. Kyle, let them know where they can find us on Twitter before we head out.
Yeah, make sure to follow us on Twitter. That is at Jackson Kruger. Make sure to follow me at by Kyle Gronin. And make sure to follow the account page that's at On the Sideline JK. That is at On the Sideline JK.
Of course, if you like audio podcast or like listen to the audio feed, anywhere you get your podcast, the audio only feed should be available. It's called On the Sideline Podcast. Or if you tend to listen there, if you found us there somehow, check us out on YouTube, Jackson Kruger Sports. You can see our faces. But yeah, that's that's it. Good show, Kyle. Any final thoughts?
No, I think we just about covered everything. Looking forward to having a little bit of breaking news to talk about. That's always a fun time of the off season.
Yes. I saw a comment last week saying that I should end the show with saying that sorry, Derek Carr couldn't make it this week. I know maybe I'm stepping on Jimmy Kimmel's bit a little bit, but that's fine. No, nothing's original anyways. Should we do that?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you to everybody. We do appreciate it. Sorry, Derek Carr could not make it this week. Hopefully he will be back next week. And until then, have a good one.
Peace.